From the New York Times, I'm Caitlin Hamill here with Katie Eschbacher, and this is Petitor Scientia, Seekers of Knowledge, and we're dedicated to in-depth debates concerning historical atrocities. Today's episode discusses the history of ancient Rome's rival Carthage, and whether the massive annihilation should be considered a genocide. We are here with Dr. Fiona Derryberry, the founding director of the Genocide Studies program at Yale University, with a PhD in international relations to discuss the topic with us.
Before we discuss why Carthage could be considered a genocide, we need to discuss the impact of labeling an event with the word genocide. Why does it really matter?
Here to discuss this further is Dr. Fiona Derryberry on whether the label of genocide truly matters and what consequences it has on all the groups involved. Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss with us today, Dr. Derryberry.
Thank you both for having me on this podcast. Before we go any further, we need to establish a definition of the word genocide. The word genocide has taken on an exceptional importance for both victims and the accused. The word's origins stem from the Holocaust by a Polish lawyer and a Jewish refugee from Nazi Germany. The two men agreed upon genocide being a premeditated crime with clearly defined goals and specified certain acts to be labeled as genocide.
What did they decide would be considered to be a genocidal act?
Genocidal acts would include killing members of a group, inflicting mental harm, imposing measures intended to prevent births, and forcibly transferring the children of the targeted group. Overall, the intent behind the act is the key to determining whether an event is a genocide or not.
How is the intent determined when different variables could confuse it, though?
The intent isn't always clear. There are messy human variables that spur disagreements, questions of legitimacy, and when to use the word genocide. The burden of calling an event a genocide has caused many governments and nations to underuse the word. The State Department, during the Rwandan genocide, was concerned that calling this event a genocide would mean that the United States would have to do something.
Why wouldn't a country feel obligated to name an event as a genocide?
Under the Genocide Convention of 1988, the United States has to send troops and aid to the victims of genocide. Because of this, the United States has always been wary to use this word due to the legal and political ties. In the response to complaints, administration backs up their ideas by saying they want to be aware of all the facts before they risk confrontations abroad, American lives, and money. There is also a moral and cultural shame in calling an event a genocide to the corresponding country. Once an event has been labeled a genocide, nothing can erase it. Both the legal and the moral impacts prevent countries from using the term genocide, which then withholds any aid or reinforcements to help the victims of these terrible crimes.
With over 17 million deaths from the Holocaust, 800,000 murders in the Rwandan genocide, and 1.7 million deaths in the Cambodian genocide, can the 150,000 people annihilated in Carthage be considered a genocide? Act 1. All about Carthage.
It's 813 BCE in Carthage, a Phoenician colony founded by the Tyre people. Princess Alyssa was fleeing her brother, King Pygmalion, who had killed her husband. So she ran away and found Carthage, but eventually committed suicide to prevent a war against the native population.
And then the mother country Tyre fell in 332 BCE, so Carthage became the leader of the western Phoenician colonies and quickly grew into a powerful empire and trade center. It wasn't even 100 years later before Carthage was the richest city in the Mediterranean.
Because the growth of Carthage happened so quickly and successfully, it became a threat to the powerful Roman Empire. The First Punic War has begun.
The First Punic War started around 264 BCE and lasted until 241 BCE. Rome struggled in the beginning, but eventually defeated the Carthaginians.
And because the Carthaginians were defeated, they were forced to pay a heavy war indemnity to Rome, and they had to give up Sicily.
Hannibal, a Carthaginian general, attacked the city of Saguntum, which was an ally of Rome. The Second Punic War has begun.
Hannibal won the Battle of Cannae, which was the most significant battle of the Second Punic War. But he was not able to hold on to the winning streak for long. He was eventually defeated by the Roman general Scipio Africanus at the Battle of Zama, which permitted Carthage to pay off their war debts.
Carthage thought they would be free from Rome's treaty once their debt was paid, but they were wrong. Cato the Elder started the sentiments that Carthage needed to be destroyed and ended all of his speeches with Carthago delenda est.
The Roman embassy demanded Carthage to dismantle their city and build it further inland, but they refused. The Third Punic War begins.
Scipio Aemilianus, a Roman general, along with the rest of the Romans, besieged Carthage for 3 years and burned it to the ground.
The land of Carthage was uninhabited until 122 BCE, when Gaius Gracchus, a Roman tribune, tried to found a small colony among the ruins, but it failed.
Julius Caesar also proposed and planned the rebuilding of Carthage, and 5 years after his death, Carthage rose again. Power was constantly shifting until the fall of the Roman Empire.
What are the necessary components of a genocide?
Act 2. Pieces of Genocides.
With us here today is Dr. Fiona Derryberry, who is here to discuss the modern viewpoint of genocides and what a genocide is.
Thank you for including me in your discussion of genocides. I have studied genocide over the last decade, and the definition of the word tends to vary. The word genocide consists of the Greek prefix genos, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin suffix kide, meaning killing. So it ultimately means the killing of a race or a tribe.
What are the main parts of the crime of genocide?
There are two main elements of genocide, mental and physical. The mental element is the intent to destroy a nationality, ethnicity, racial group, or religious group. The physical element includes 5 acts: killing members of the targeted group, inflicting serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately decreasing the quality of a group's life, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group.
Who are usually the victims of genocides? I feel like we see a vast range of people who are targeted today, but I haven't been able to pinpoint a specific group of people who are usually targeted.
Victims of genocide are deliberately targeted because of their real or perceived membership of one of the 4 groups: religious, ethnic, racial, or nationality.
Act 3. Worldwide genocides.
Our first example is one of the largest genocides in history, where over 6 million people died at the hands of the Nazis, their military allies, and their civilian associates. The word Holocaust means the destruction of life by fire, which is fitting because thousands of people were burned and cremated in this event.
This murderous effort rested on an ideology of racial superiority and aspirations of racial purity. While many people were targeted, the Jewish population was at the center of the torture. Along with the Jewish community, the physically and mentally disabled, members of religious minorities, political opponents, and Slavic Russian citizens were only a few of the hundreds of targeted groups during the Holocaust.
Under the ruling of Adolf Hitler, a Polish man who rose during Germany's Great Depression, his followers, the Nazis, first began in 1933 with concentration camps, and then shortly expanded to mass killings and death camps.
Allied powers after the end of World War II discovered the concentration camps and liberated whatever prisoners were still alive. But many camps mass murdered their prisoners in hopes of hiding their debauchery. It officially ended and the last of the prisoners were liberated in 1945.
Although this is possibly the deadliest genocide in our history, there are still significant genocides that occurred in our modern world.
Another genocide that has happened rather recently was the Rwandan genocide in 1944. The intent was to destroy the Tutsi population. When the genocide was over, more than 14% of the entire Tutsi population was killed.
Hundreds of thousands were killed and more were raped, maimed, or otherwise traumatized. The extermination effort took place within the context of a civil war, but the carnage exceeded more than the deaths at the front line.
The government diverted military resources from the war in order to slaughter the civilians.
The civil war during this period was between the Tutsi Rwandan Patriotic Army versus the Hutu government. It ended in a peace treaty that ensured the government would work to instill a better form.
Then, a rebel group known as the Hutus took over the government since they were trying to instill a better government, and they targeted political rivals and the Tutsi civilians. The massacre sites were at places in which the civilians thought that they would be safe, such as factories, churches, and government buildings.
The genocide ended when the Tutsi population came back and the corrupt Hutu government fled the country.
The Cambodian genocide started in 1975 and lasted until 1979, in which 1.7 million people lost their lives, and that was 21% of the population. Pol Pot, an extremist ideology with ethnic animosity and a disregard for human life, and the Khmer Rouge, which was the Communist Party in Cambodia, both took over Cambodia and the country was cut off from the outside world.
Brutal persecutions plagued the Buddhist monks and ethnic minorities such as the Chinese, Vietnamese, Sham Muslims, and Thai. With the bloody purges, the Pol Pot group intended to eliminate all dissident communists and other moderate and recalcitrants. Cambodia launched military attacks across all three of its borders, massacring civilians in Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos.
With all of these examples of genocides, could the destruction of Carthage be considered a genocide?
Act 4. Is Carthage a genocide?
Carthago delenda est may be the first ever recorded enticement to genocide. Cato the Elder demanded the destruction of Carthage. Carthage even tried to make peace agreements after the end of the Second Punic War, but the Roman government refused to listen.
At least 150,000 Carthaginians died in this 3-year siege and eventual burning of the city. The Carthaginians were utterly exterminated. 55,000 men and 25,000 women were put into slavery under the counsel of Cato.
The modern definition of genocide fits Cato's statement of destroying the nation while using extreme violence and annihilating Carthage along with its entire culture.
Cato's broader thinking also shared more modern features with recent tragedies, such as the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, and the Cambodian and Rwandan catastrophes.
Cato, like the modern perpetrators of these 20th century genocides, was preoccupied with militaristic expansion, the idea of cultivation, and cultural prejudices.
The decimation of Carthage was so strange since it happened after the city decided to surrender, and Cato's reasoning was that they still posed a threat to Rome. Historians believe that this decision was based on either trying to minimize the threat that Carthage posed or their power hunger. Cato believed that the danger was internal and focused all of his military actions on threats to Rome.
Cato, like modern dictators, wanted to keep the women in place, which he did by imposing the Oppian Law. Cato thought women were untamed animals, and this was a matter of social control.
Cato greatly disliked Greek culture since he thought that it would cause the end to Roman culture. Racial prejudice was uncommon in the ancient world, but Cato's main focus was on Rome's lineage. He believed that any other culture would corrupt the Romans.
Cato's hatred for foreign entities explains the need to destroy Carthage. He thought Carthage was too powerful to keep alive, but not powerful enough to best Rome. He thought the best way to keep the Roman Republic alive was to eliminate any form of threat.
Act 5. Use of the G word.
After reviewing the modern examples of genocide and what it takes to be considered one, do you think that the word has an important impact? Why does it matter to call an event like Carthage a genocide even though it happened centuries ago?
From this information provided by our research and the help from Dr. Derryberry, the term genocide is used sparingly and often to avoid bruising egos or having to provide aid to the victims of the crimes. Carthage, at this point, is not in need of reinforcements or any gratification for the victims or their families. So does this debate whether Carthage is a genocide even matter at all?